from Vanderbilt Pulmonary Clinic in Nashville, Tennessee. And I'm thrilled to have you here today. And I'm going to turn it over to you as soon as I make this disclaimer. I want everyone to know that we are talking about FDA-approved therapies for idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis. However, none of the information that we discuss today is intended to be medical advice or should not be interpreted as a medical recommendation. We encourage you to take the information that we provide you with today and discuss it with your healthcare providers so you can decide what the best treatments are for you. All right, Anne, I'm going to let you take it away. I'll stay on the line and maybe we can have a little discussion as well. Go ahead.
Hi, thanks. So today we're going to talk about accessing the approved therapies for IPF. So you receive an IPF diagnosis and you're told that there are two medicines that can provide hope for slowing down the progress of your fibrosis. Those two medicines are pirfenidone, better known as Esbriet, and nintedanib, which is better known as Ofev. But then you're told that these drugs have an average retail price of $90,000 per year. That's $7,500 per month. And if you're like most people, your next thought is probably, how can I possibly afford this? The fact is that drugs for rare diseases like IPF are usually expensive. In fact, there are drugs for some rare conditions out there that can cost as much as $350,000 to $800,000 per year. The good news is that help is available for most people. Whether your circumstance is that you have no insurance, no prescription drug insurance, or you have what we call commercial, which is non-government insurance, such as what you get through your job or through your spouse's job, or you have a government insurance program such as Medicare or Medicaid. The different patient assistance programs that are available are private foundations. We have two of them that are helping IPF patients. They are HealthWell and Patient Services, Inc., also known as PSI, Inc. The drug makers themselves also have foundations. In the case of Esbriet, we have the Genentech Access to Care Foundation. And in the case of Ofev, we have the BI Cares Foundation Patient Assistance Programs. And both of the drug manufacturers also have copay card programs. There are limitations, of course, to any of these assistance programs. They have different household income limits. In general, a good rule of thumb is that households with an annual adjusted gross income that is greater than $150,000 may not be eligible for assistance. But there are special circumstances that can be considered, and so we'll talk about that in a few minutes. The bottom line is, don't assume that you will not be eligible. If you need assistance to help access these medicines, then always apply for assistance. So let's run through a couple of different scenarios. Let's say that you're someone who does not have any prescription drug insurance. What happens? Well, your pulmonologist's office should refer you directly to your drug manufacturer's foundation. You are going to be responsible for completing and signing certain forms. You're going to be responsible for making sure that you have your most recent tax return available, not only for filling out the forms, but in case the foundation wants you to send them a copy. But that is how it's going to go if you don't have insurance. Both drug makers have assistance set up for people in that circumstance. The more is that people do have access to some type of prescription drug insurance, in which case your pulmonologist's office has to file what's called a prior authorization with your insurer. Anytime you have a specialty drug, the insurance company requires that it be prior authorized. This is also true with certain types of testing, so you may be familiar with having to go through that process. The good news is that Esbriet and Ofev are almost always approved for patients with a diagnosis of IPF. So if you're denied, your doctor's office should always appeal that denial. In fact, in the last couple of years, I have only had 2 people actually that have had their appeal denied. And in both of those cases, those were very unusual circumstances. So always make sure that you appeal. Don't give up just because you get that initial denial. So let's say that your insurance has approved or your appeal was approved. So what's going to happen next is your doctor's office is going to send the prescription to your specialty pharmacy. Now, this is not your local Walgreens or CVS because these are specialty drugs. They're only handled by certain authorized pharmacies. And so that specialty pharmacy that received the prescription is going to file what's called a test claim. And what that means is basically the pharmacy sends a bill to your insurance company for your medicine, and the insurance company responds back with, this is how much the patient is responsible for. And so then the specialty pharmacy should call you and tell you what is your copay going to be. Now, I have seen copays that range anywhere from $18 per month to $8,000 per month. And your copay can differ if you have to meet a certain deductible, for example, or if you're in the Medicare donut hole. You may have a very high copay amount, especially initially. So it's not unusual that people can't afford it. On average, I usually see copays in the range of about $2,000 to $3,000. And for most folks, $24,000 per year for one drug when they have plenty of other expenses is still not affordable. So what happens when you can't afford your copay? Well, the specialty pharmacy should refer you to a foundation for assistance. Now, if you have that commercial non-government insurance, that assistance is going to be with the drug manufacturer's copay program. If you have Medicare or Medicaid, that assistance is going to go through either HealthWell Foundation or PSI Inc. Now, it does happen sometimes that either HealthWell or PSI, the private foundation, will deny you. So what do you do if that happens? Well, if your household's income limit exceeds the private foundation, then you may still be eligible through the Drug Makers Foundation because they have different income limits. And so if your copay, your first copay assistance application is denied, then the specialty pharmacy should refer you to the Manufacturers Foundation. And again, there'll be certain forms that you need to fill out. Your doctor's office will need to verify your prescription, but the person who will be contacting you next will be the Drug Makers Foundation. So that's a lot of information. So let's go through real quick a summary of what we've just talked about. So let's say you're uninsured. Your doctor should refer you to the drug manufacturer. If you do have insurance, then a prior authorization should be sent by your doctor's office. If that prior authorization is denied, then your pulmonologist should appeal that. And let me mention too here is if in the very rare circumstance your appeal is denied and your insurance absolutely refuses to cover any part of this medicine, then you will be referred to the Drug Makers Foundation, because in that situation, if your insurance completely denies you, then you're in the same circumstance as someone with no prescription drug insurance. And so that is one of the things that the Drug Manufacturers Foundation is there for. Assuming that insurance does agree to cover at least part of the cost, then your doctor's office is going to send a prescription to your specialty pharmacy. That specialty pharmacy is going to run that test claim and is going to contact you with your copay information, and then they will refer you to the appropriate assistance program. Once the assistance is approved, as it is for most people who apply, then the specialty pharmacy will schedule with you a mail delivery of your medication. So let's talk about that circumstance where your household income is greater than $150,000 per year. What can you do? You may still be eligible for help under special circumstances. Some of the common things that I see is that your income was unusual that year, or it's expected to change. For example, maybe you sold an asset, or maybe your current income tax information shows what your income is working full-time, or your spouse is working full-time, and one or both of you is about to retire. Or maybe because of your diagnosis and because of your symptoms, you're needing to apply for disability. So your income in the future is going to look very different. We also have situations where people have unusually high expenses. You could have high out-of-pocket medical costs you're having to pay, or your spouse is having to pay. Or perhaps you have a dependent, maybe an adult child who is disabled, who you are having to take care of. Now, when I say special circumstances, I'm not referring to expenses that we actually have control over. For example, the fact that you have a mortgage on a winter home in Florida, or you're putting your grandkids through private school. Those kinds of circumstances are not going to be considered by the drug manufacturer. What they're looking for is those types of expenses that we can't adjust our budget to cut back on them. So things like dependent care or caregiving expenses, medical expenses, those types of things. So if you feel like you have some special circumstances, set that out in a letter. Detail what your circumstances are, or how things are going to change in the future, and send that to the Drug Manufacturers Foundation. And if your request is denied and you feel like you do have special circumstances, you do need help, and your request is denied, talk to your doctor's office about if you can switch medications and try to get assistance from the other drug manufacturer. In most circumstances, there's not a medical reason why you have to only try one medicine versus the other medicine. So talk to your doctor and see if it's possible to switch medications and give that application a try with the other drug manufacturer. Just because you're denied by one, don't automatically give up on getting any IPF therapy until you've at least tried. So what can you do to help the process? And this is actually very important because it's always disheartening to me when I hear stories about patients who have had to wait a really long period of time to get their medicine, or they've fallen out of the process somehow and they have to start all over again. Or worst of all, their doctor tells them, okay, we'll start you on this particular medicine, and then they never hear anything again. We want to make sure that that doesn't happen. So what can you do to help? Well, the first thing, respond quickly to requests. That may seem kind of obvious, but you'd be surprised at how often people end up losing access or delayed access to medicine simply because they don't respond to requests for information. I know that we're all being robocalled to death, and we're afraid to answer our phone when we see it's an unknown caller because it's always some computer. But the fact is that not only when you're wanting to access medications, but just in general, when you're having to manage a chronic disease like IPF, then it's important that either you decide to go ahead and answer your phone or set up your voicemail. Make sure it's set up and check it every day. Return those phone calls. Complete and return any application forms. Sign anything that they want you to sign. And also ask the person who is requesting this information, whether it's your doctor's office or a foundation, ask them, how can I get this form, this application, how can you get it to me and how can I get it back to you as quickly as possible? Many times there are different ways that you can complete these. Sometimes you can do them online if you're comfortable doing that. Sometimes you can fax things. I have many patients who either are able to get faxes in their home, or they have family members who can fax through their jobs, or they go to their local library, their Staples, their Office Depot, fax things back and forth that way to help speed up the process. Another thing is keep contact information handy. Keep something by your phone or hanging on your fridge so that when these different people call you, whether it's the specialty pharmacy or a foundation, ask them, make sure you know what their contact information is so that you can contact them back. Don't sit and wait to hear something. Be proactive. When people contact you, ask them, all right, now who are you exactly, and what is your step in the process? Make sure that you're clear on that. You get a lot of different people calling you from your doctor's office, the pharmacy, the different foundations, and then if you're denied by one foundation, you're referred to another one. It can quickly become overwhelming. So make sure when people contact you that you're perfectly clear on who they are, what are the next steps in the process, what are their contact information. Ask them about how long is this next step supposed to take. Ask them to give you an idea about what period of time you should expect before you hear something back. And if you don't hear something back within that time frame, check in, call them back. So check in with your doctor's office. Ask them for updates of where you are in the process. With the specialty pharmacy, call them and say, I was expecting to hear about my copay and I haven't heard anything. Or you said you sent a referral. Did you send that referral? And if so, to whom and when? And the same thing with the foundations. Ask them for updates. It's very important that you not think that, well, I don't want to call and bother people. The fact is that it's your medicine. This is your life. This is your health. This is your medicine. So be a squeaky wheel. Make sure that everyone is explaining things to you fully. If they're not, then ask them to go back through it again and call and do updates, and make sure that you are comfortable with where you are, and excuse me, I'm sorry, and make sure that you're aware of what the next steps are, and ask lots of questions. Now, I did get someone who, actually several people, when I talked about this at the PFF Summit, and this is not in the slideshow, but I wanted to add this because I did receive a lot of concerns about this, is that when talking about this assistance, people are worried about, well, what does the future hold? What if I get assistance right now and then I lose my medicine because of things like, well, my taxes are going to change because of the new tax bill? Or what if these foundations run out of money? What's going to happen in the future? And it is true that we don't know exactly what financial assistance will be available, 2 years from now, 3 years from now. But I can tell you that I've spoken multiple times to the makers of both Esbriet and OFAV, and they've assured me that they remain committed to helping people, as many people as possible, get access to this medication. And so moving forward, I feel very hopeful that we're still going to be able to get the vast majority of patients access to this information. And just for some contact information, all of these, you can find this, you can look them up on the web and find it. This is the contact information for the HealthWell Foundation and for Patient Services Incorporated. And Sorry, I'm having an issue with, there we go. Okay. And this is the contact information for the different manufacturers' programs. Again, the copay program is for people who have commercial insurance, like through jobs, and the foundations are for people who have no insurance or they have government insurance and need help. And the most important resource, which I give out, not only about talking about access to your medicine, but about anything relating to questions about your IPF. The wonderful resource is the PFF Patient Communication Center. They can not only answer a lot of questions for you, but they can also refer you out to the appropriate places to get answers to your questions. And with that, my part is done. Unless we have questions.
Yeah, thanks, Anne. Thank you. That was terrific. I actually learned a lot there because I did not know all of that. We do have a couple of questions that have been written in. I'm going to try to address them. You can see if you want to weigh in on them. The first is the question is, what if you have reacted to both approved medications and cannot tolerate those medications? So this is certainly a medical question, and we do have patients, and I'm a pulmonologist in my own practice. I've had patients who have not been able to tolerate either medication. And the answer to this question is very specific to the individual patient who's experiencing this problem. So unfortunately, I don't have a single answer to that question, but the general answer to the question is to talk to your healthcare provider, whether that's a pulmonologist or nurse practitioner or physician assistant, or who's ever primarily in charge of your pulmonary care, and discuss what your other treatment options are. There are different strategies that different healthcare providers will use to try to get people to tolerate one or the other medication. And sometimes people cannot tolerate either medication. In those situations, sometimes enrollment in a research study like a clinical trial may be an option. So I'd encourage you to talk to your provider about that. You can also look on our website, the Pulmonary Fibrosis website, the Pulmonary Fibrosis Foundation website, which is pulmonaryfibrosis.org. For a little bit more information on where you can get ILD care, you can search for pulmonary fibrosis care centers, hopefully near where you live. I apologize, I'm not able to give you a more specific answer than that. We also have a fairly detailed question about insurance coverage, and Anne, maybe you can help with this. I'll read the question. I'm on military TRICARE, which I know many of us have patients on TRICARE. Until recently, I was provided assistance through HealthWell in the Accredo pharmacy, but in August, the Department of Defense said that I had to go through TRICARE pharmacy, but they won't accept HealthWell or anything else supplemental. The copayment is negligible in my case, but I can't get reimbursed for it. How can I get reimbursed? So I'll tell you that I certainly don't have the answer to that. I do know that you can reach out to our Patient Communication Center, which you see on the screen there, either through email, which is pcc@pulmonaryfibrosis.org, or you can directly call us and speak with Lindsay or whoever's staffing the line that day. The phone number is 844-TALK, T-A-L-K, PFF, and the number there is 844-825-5733. And do you have any experience with TRICARE in this situation?
My experience is with people who have a copay that they cannot afford. In that situation, when they're not able to get assistance otherwise, then the drug manufacturers' foundations can assist. In this particular circumstance where they have a copay that they are able to pay, but they're looking to get reimbursement through TRICARE, I'm sorry, but I do not have information about specifically how you could do that. I would recommend calling TRICARE directly and asking them for that information, because they should have information available to you about their particular reimbursement process under your particular plan.
Thanks for that. Thanks, Anne. I don't know if here we go. Thanks, Anne, for that. So that's that. We don't have any additional questions. I do want to let you know that we have an upcoming webinar. Our next webinar will be on Wednesday, January 17th at noon Central Time. And that's a quote Ask a Doc webinar, where you're going to have myself and at least 2 other ILD doctors on the line ready to answer questions. We'd love for you to register for that event and submit your questions ahead of time. You'll also be able to ask questions in real time, just as a few of our participants did today. I want to thank you, Anne, for doing such a terrific job. This was a wealth of terrific information that I think is going to be helpful to everyone. I want to thank Ms. Lori Price at the PFF for making all of this happen. And I also want to thank our sponsors, Ehringer Ingelheim and Genentech. I hope you all tune in January for our next webinar. Thank you so much for participating.